With the Platinum Shield, you'll get the same personal service you've come to expect.
If you think your education is limited because you can't attend college during the day, consider Drake University, offering over 200 courses and more than 40 degree programs in the evening, including accelerated programs for business majors. Working adults appreciate convenient class schedules and services, and Drake professors assure students a quality education. So at Drake, the only real difference between day and evening classes is the time of day. Classes start soon. Call for information.
This is CNN. From Washington, Crossfire. On the left, Mike Kinsley. On the right, Fred Barnes. Tonight, laissez-faire or unfair? In the Crossfire, Democratic Senator Donald Reigle of Michigan. And in New York, Yoshi Tsurumi, professor of international business at Baruch College.
Good evening. Welcome to Crossfire. President Bush arrived in Japan today leading a posse of American business executives. Their target, Japan's $41 billion trade surplus with the United States. Tomorrow, the president meets with Prime Minister Miyazawa, but first he stopped to celebrate a rare American marketing success in Japan.
And I hope that Toys R Us is but the first in a long line of American retailers to locate in this great country. Greater access is an exciting idea, and it'll help create more jobs in America.
The Japanese say they want to be helpful. Miyazawa has called for compassion, quote unquote, for America's economic difficulties. I really don't want Mr. Miyazawa's sympathy, sniffed the chairman of General Motors today. He's in Tokyo with President Bush. So whose fault is it that Americans buy Hondas and Toyotas, but the Japanese don't buy Buicks and Chryslers? Is Japan cheating in the trade game, or is it America that's doing something wrong? That's the Crossfire. Fred?
Professor Tsurumi, we just saw President Bush at the Toys R Us store in Tokyo that just opened, and here's my question. It took 3 years for the U.S. government to force the Japanese to allow the first Toys R Us store to open. Now the second one grudgingly has been allowed to be open. It took the personal intervention, aggressive intervention of the Commerce Secretary, Robert Mossbacher. Why do the Japanese try to block American firms from coming in when Japanese firms are welcome in the United States?
There are last remaining sectors which are certainly close to foreign competition. Rice market is one, and certainly distribution channel has been like that to protect the Papa Mama shop. Indeed, it took 3 years, but that's a wrong interpretation to make. The reason Toys R Us opening was successful was because there was already inside Japan, there was a strong constituencies pushing for that change, the repeal of so-called large store law, which protected the Papa Mama shops. So that's a formula for success. And the other point, the irony of Toys R Us is, I hope just the President Bush noticed, most of American brand toys in Toys R Us are made not in the United States, unfortunately, made in Malaysia and other Asia. So
well, I can't guarantee that he noticed that. He probably didn't, in fact.
That's another story.
That is another story that we'll go into later. Yeah. Let me ask you another question, and it's this. It's about a company that I'm familiar with because I've talked to American businessmen who work in Japan, and they all say the same thing, and Motorola is a good example, that the only way that they can expand their market and get into new areas is by using the battering ram of the U.S. government. They have to use the U.S. Embassy every day. Motorola is a good example. They lead the world in cellular phones. The Japanese said there are no frequencies. You can't bid for anything. When, of course, there were frequencies when the U.S. government went and told the Japanese government there were. Why is it that way?
No, that was 7 years ago. That was the stupidity and folly of the Japanese government or Japanese. Yes, but the Motorola case is interesting. They tried to open Japanese market. Thank God, I have been pushing that. But they are not making cellular telephones in the United States. They're making it in Malaysia again. So,
yeah, but that wasn't the reason the Japanese government was trying to block them from expanding. That's irrelevant.
No, the point I'm making is certain fields have been certainly closed. But to make the wide sweeping accusation today and say just therefore that the United States businesses don't succeed unless they follow the Motorola or just the auto executives phony show.
Professor, let me ask you a question, if I may. Senator Reigle, let me address a question to you. If you look at the bilateral trade deficits with Japan since 1980, including the one for 92 now, or 91, 42 billion, it's a total of $460 billion that has left the United States and gone to Japan. It seems to me that any kind of a sustained, very high bilateral deficit of that kind, we don't have one of that size with any other country, and when you have all of these barriers to entry, you know, in foreign cars, 3% of the Japanese market. The United States only has 1 percentage point, but the rest of the world...
You got to ask a question. You said you were going to ask a question.
The question is, why does Japan insist on maintaining these large bilateral trade deficits, which are draining so much economic strength and jobs out of the United States?
That's the question.
Okay, that's the question. It's an interesting one, and he's coming from Michigan State, so I understand. But the problem is just there's not much for Japan to buy, and all this humbug about the American cars, the quality has improved. Just check the second-hand car price in the United States. American consumers are not buying American cars. That's why the American...
Senator, we're going back to the normal format here, and I'm asking you the question.
With all due respect, then, you mentioned the distribution channels. The distribution channels have been clogged in Japan for 12 years, and you know that just as I do. To allow 2 Toys R Us stores in there, I just saw that picture with Bush. Here's a little plastic car on the ground, probably sells for $25 or $30 or $40. Cars coming the other way costing $20, $30, $40,000. This has to do with the economic future of America. What kind of jobs are we going to have in the future? How are we going to earn our national and personal income? We've got to have a balance of trade with Japan. The barriers have to come down.
All right, you don't have to answer that because I didn't detect a question. Now let me ask you, Senator. Volkswagen and BMW managed to sell lots and lots of cars in Japan.
This many.
Oh, no, a heck of a lot more than we do.
Well, it's less than 2% of the whole market share over there.
They're selling enough so that we'd be happy to be able to do that well. How are they doing it if we can't do it?
Well, first of all, they're selling very few. The total foreign car sales in Japan right now is 3% of the market. Only 3% of the market. They have no. It's not wrong.
It is wrong.
Well,
what is it according to you, Professor?
No, last year it's a lot. I checked the data yesterday. Last year, Japan imported close to 350,000 units of passenger cars.
350,000?
Yes.
You've got to be kidding me.
I'm not.
How many did they ship to the United States?
No, that's irrelevant.
Well, do you know the answer to that question?
They're not forcing these cars on us, Senator. They're shipping them over here because people want to buy them.
No, but they're shipping them over and selling them below cost in this market.
Oh, that's another
if you want to buy a Japanese car today, buy a Lexus today, over in
Why would
Tokyo,
they be doing that?
They actually charge because they want to get the extra production units sold in this country. They sell them below cost.
They're like these used car salesmen we always hear about who are losing on every deal but making it up in volume.
Yes, until such time as they cave in the domestic industry in this country, and then the prices are going to go up.
Senator,
they're not going to sell them for less here than they sell them in Tokyo for after they've done away with the American producers.
Something. In Japan, they drive on the other side of the road. America has been trying for all these years to sell the Japanese cars with the steering wheel on our side instead of the other side.
Michael, we have not... Well, here's the answer.
Would you buy a car with the steering wheel on the wrong side? Isn't that ridiculous? Doesn't that suggest that it's partly our fault?
But you haven't been able to buy an American car in Japan, whichever side it's on. The Europeans make cars that have steering wheels on the other side, and they have not been able to sell in Japan either.
My point is,
the Japanese don't want cars from other countries.
Isn't it largely our fault if this is just one example? They don't think the cars are good quality. We can argue about that forever. But if you're not willing to put the steering wheel on the right side, how can you hope to sell any cars?
If the steering wheel is on the right side or the left side or on the roof, if they won't allow you to distribute the cars in Japan, it doesn't make any difference.
Right,
but we do have problems in this country. I mean, we do have problems that we have to solve here.
Well, no, Mr. Tsurumi, it is true that we have problems in this country.
Then how can Volkswagen, mass producers, and others been able to expand their own dealership? And when just the American 3 automobile firms are not doing it. So
Professor,
you are blaming. Let me finish, sir. Just how can you blame Japan or Japanese market when you have 3 executives over there who are most responsible for the demise of American industries, and they are just blaming Japan. And this Bush's trip to Japan is also another donkey and pony show. It's a grand demagoguery.
It's a dog and pony show, Mr. Tsurumi.
Pony and dog show, whatever. Dog and pony show. Anyway,
I think.
Yeah, sorry, but there was a few details to be ironed out. But the point is that demagoguery. And the Japanese are not responsible for American economic recession.
Let me, Mr. Professor, let me be very blunt with you. I think Japan has an economic strategy that it's been pursuing now for at least 2 decades. It targets industries in this country. Targeted television, targeted the computer industry, targeted automobiles and the industrial base. I think is now beginning to target aviation, because it wants to take these jobs to Japan. I understand that strategy. Right. The United States, I think, needs to have a strategy of its own.
I agree with you.
And so that's partly a question we have to answer.
But
we should not allow Japan to carry out these predatory trading practices.
I disagree.
It's not the predatory trading.
Stop, Professor. We got to cut you off. We got to cut you off too, Senator. I disagree with both of you. When we come back, we're going to talk about Senator Reigle's bill to address some of those very things.
Not until now has it been harnessed to help shape the most important body on the face of the earth. Yours. Presenting the Schwinn Bowflex, a revolutionary series of power rods or bows that give you from 5 to more than 400 pounds of progressive resistance. Resistance that provides for advanced strength training and a complete cardiovascular workout. In fact, Schwinn Bowflex can help you achieve total fitness, because medical research has proven that adding weight training to aerobics is a key contributor to losing fat. Call this toll-free number now for a free brochure. There's no obligation, so there's no reason not to call. In just 30 minutes every other day, you can harness it to help make your body the best it can be. The power of the bow. The Schwinn Bowflex. A great body is just around the bend.
What could be better than that warm after the holidays feeling?
How about pearls, 30 to 60% off sale? Every frame in the store is on sale. Every lady's frame.
Every men's frame.
Every kid's frame.
Every frame is 30 to 60% off regular price.
You don't even need a coupon.
Tis a far, far bigger sale than Pearl has ever had before.
But hurry, the sale will soon be history.
Tonight, upscale nightclubs using nudity to attract customers, sparking debate. Where do we draw the line? We talk about it tonight on Larry King Live, 9 Eastern on CNN.
Welcome back to Crossfire. In celebration of President Bush's state visit to Japan, we're arguing here about the trade deficit. Last year, Japan sold $41 billion more of stuff to America than America sold to Japan. Whose fault is that? Our guests, in New York, Yoshi Tsurumi. He's a professor of international business at Baruch College of the City University. And here in Washington, Senator Don Reigle, Democrat of Michigan, home of the big 3 auto companies. I leave you to guess who's on which side. Senator Reigle, you have a bill you're pushing which would simply order Japan to reduce its trade deficit to 0 over 5 years, never mind how.
That's
now,
right.
that has nothing to do with open markets or fair trade or anything else, does it?
Well, I think it does. I think it has something to do with both open markets and fair trade. I think over 5 years, if that $42 billion deficit of last year were brought down in equal amounts, 20% a year, so we had a balance of trade 5 years into the future, I think that's very reasonable, and that involves open markets in Japan.
You don't really believe, do you, that if Japan's markets were as completely open as anyone could wish tomorrow, we would have a balanced trade with Japan?
No, and that's not why I'm not calling for it for tomorrow. I'm calling for it 5 years in the future. In other words, we've got to start now in steps that are reasonable to get to that point 5 years in the future.
Isn't it up to consumers to decide what they want to buy and producers to decide, build products that they will sell to them, rather than us ordering American consumers in Japan, Japanese consumers, to buy things from particular countries?
Well, in part it is, but you've got to have fair trading laws, and you've got to have open access to that market. We're already 10 years late there. So the problem is, here we are scratching to get a second Toys R Us store going over there, Well, they've got a $42 billion trade surplus with us last year. They've taken $460 billion out of the United States in the last 12 years.
No, Mr. Tsurumi,
I mean, it's where our economic strength is going.
Mr. Tsurumi.
Yes.
Don't you think, though, there is a point? I'm not for Senator Reigle's bill. I'm not for any protectionism of any kind. But there is a difference, I think you'll have to concede, between the United States that is receptive to other countries sending their firms over. They actually lure them in. Kentucky had incentives, tax incentives and otherwise, of something like $270 million for Toyota to bring a plant to the United States. And yet when American firms want to go to Japan, they're resisted. There is a big difference, isn't there?
Resisted up until during the 1970s. You are quoting updated evidences trying to suddenly blame Japan for all the American problems. Yes, it is the case. But let me get back to the Senator's bill. I've seen the many bad ideas coming out of Washington, but this tops really them all. And if Senator believes that is a way to deal with it, that he can believe anything, and I have a second-hand bridge to sell him.
Well, let me ask you this question.
One more point. The Europe has now running $20 billion just the trade surplus in the United States, and he will turn around and say, hey, all right, reduce this trade deficit just in the 5 years, the same way you demanded Japan to do it.
Thank you for mentioning that. Thank you for mentioning that. The Europeans are not complaining to the United States, but what did the Europeans do with Japan? The Europeans have just said to Japan that they're going to limit the market share in cars to 16% in Europe for the next 10 years. Now, why did Europe do that? Because they know that Japan does not play fair in the trading area with respect to cars and vehicles. And you know what? Japan accepted that from Europe, didn't it?
Well, yes. But
of course they did.
As a result, just the European auto industry goes on, except some transplanted.
But why did that happen? Why do you suppose that happened?
What?
Why do you suppose the Europeans found it necessary to limit the Japanese to a 16% market share for the next 10 years?
Because they cannot compete with Japanese cars in terms of quality and others. That's it.
Senator, would it be okay with you if Japan met this 5-year deadline, not by increasing its imports from America, but by decreasing its exports to America, by not shipping us those cars?
I think it would be a combination of both things. But in the end...
Why should American consumers why should the American government be setting things up so that American consumers can't get the goods they want?
For this reason, that if you're going to be a consumer in America, you've got to have a job and you've got to have an income. And this country needs to look after its economic future and what our job base is going to be and where our national income.
Let me finish. Reducing trade increases jobs?
Well, it did for Japan.
It didn't for us in the Smoot-Hawley tariff.
Didn't it for Japan when they reduced trade into Japan 10 years ago? Well, that's why they're so strong today and why we're so weak.
Let me ask you.
Because they're foolish. They're strong because they're building good cars. They're building good cars, and we're building lousy cars.
But they kept us out. No, they kept us out for over a decade. The Europeans, by the way, allowed the Americans...
kept them out for over a decade. 10 years ago, we started these voluntary restraints, temporary protection so we could start making good cars again. It's been 10 years, they haven't done it.
Let me ask you, what happened when the Europeans allowed the Americans to come in and build cars in Europe? How are we doing in terms of building and selling American cars in Europe? We're doing fine, aren't we? And we would have in Japan if we'd been let in there. We were not let in.
Americans don't buy American cars. It's not a question of Japanese.
Yes, they do. Two-thirds of the cars sold are American cars.
Let me ask Mr. Tsurumi something. I own a Japanese car, also own 2 American cars, but...
God bless you.
Thank you. But here's my question. My question is this: why is, I mean, you've accused me of citing old cases and suggested that Japan is different now. When Japanese banks are allowed to and have bought American banks, what would happen if an American bank tried to buy a Japanese bank?
That's a very long
exactly what would happen. Yeah. They wouldn't be able to buy them.
That's precisely what's wrong with the American system. Just this hostile takeovers and selling of all these corporations and ridiculous and treating a corporation, especially employees, as if some kind of cost centers. That's precisely what's wrong with the United States. So you're asking Japan to come down to the level of inferior level of American quality and the hostile takeover money game practices.
Well, let me ask you this.
So don't accuse Japan of just practicing the good things.
Mr. Tsurumi, you want Japan to play these games in the United States, but you don't want the United States to play the game in Japan. That's simply unfair.
It is not unfair. It's tough. U.S. should change this. The United States, that should make it more difficult for American or foreigners to buy banks or any other firm.
Yeah, but you make it sound as if there's nothing that we can make and sell there, and I don't buy that. We sell things all over the world. The only place we can't sell them is Japan.
That's not true. If it is automobile, and there's many IBM computers and aircraft which have been selling all over, are also sold in Japan. So you can sell quality products. It's 1992, Senator.
How about
wait a
minute. Let's take a break since we've nailed down that it's 1992. And when we come back, we'll find out why Japanese trade officials once tried to stop imports of U.S. skis, claiming that Japanese snow is different.
Hello, I'm Susan Rook. At the top of the hour, a show of force to break up a demonstration against the new government in Georgia. American expectations from the president's Asian trip, and your teenager may be using common household products for a deadly high. Prime News is right after Crossfire.
This is ordinary bulk fiber. It's full of grit. This is new Sunrise Smooth Metamucil. The grit is gone because it's triple ground for smoothness. This is ordinary fiber. The grit is definitely not gone. This is new Sunrise Smooth Metamucil, the best mixing, smoothest tasting natural fiber you can buy. The grit is gone. New Sunrise Smooth Metamucil. For regularity, nothing works better. And the grit is gone.
Something's waiting inside the powerful 486SX computer. A technology that will make it even more powerful. We call it Room for the Future. Introducing built-in upgradability. Check into it. From Intel, the computer inside.
You wanna accentuate the positive, eliminate the negative. Tune in to the affirmative, the family channel, yes indeed.
Nobody captures life on the positive side like the Family Channel.
You wanna accentuate the positive, the family channel, yes indeed.
What happens when you buy Purina Biscuits brand dog snacks? You get a coupon worth $1.50 off any Purina dog food. Here's how it works. Buy Purina Biscuits, get $1.50 off. Purina Biscuits, $1.50 off.
Purina Biscuits, $1.50 off. Purina Biscuits, $1.50 off. Purina Biscuits, $1.50 off. Purina.
Remember, with Purina Biscuits, you'll never have to pay full price for Purina dog food again.
Nice dog!
Mr. Tsurumi, I know you're going to tell me that the incident involving the American skis happened some years ago, and in fact it did. But here's my question. My question is, why would a Japanese trade official come up with a cockamamie argument like that, the Japanese snow is different? I can't imagine some U.S. official in the Customs Service coming up with something like that.
You can't.
They can, and they have. I have been collecting horror stories of each country, and someday I will certainly write the books about it. Japanese officials did it because there was an interest group which wanted to protect, just like auto industry today in the United States, trying to protect their own nesting. They cannot compete, so they go to the government, and unfortunately Japan doesn't have a monopoly over silly bureaucrats and politicians. But that happened 10 years ago, to be exact. I had a long talk with the ministry officials at the time, and now the European skis are being imported in increasing numbers in Japan.
Senator Reigle, isn't it pathetic for the President of the United States, the leader of the free world, to be going over to Japan with a chorus of whining business executives saying, oh, please, oh, pretty please buy our cars? As an American, I find that humiliating, don't you?
Well, I think it does make the president look weak, and I think it's weak because we've not had a strategy, a trade strategy for many years, nor a strategy even within America to build our industrial strength to a higher level. But you know, Bush has been around now. This is his 11th year. I mean, Reagan, Bush, Quayle. And, the fact that they're 11 years late on this and still going over hat in hand is it is disquieting. It's very troubling.
You want to take 50 seconds, Mr. Tsurumi, and tell us what you think American industry ought to do?
American industries do the basic things, get the good the products American consumers would buy and develop the services. And then they can have a chance in Japan. So what the Bush can do to get salvage something out of this trip is to ask Japan to keep all these executives who are responsible for American demise and reform them.
Well, right, how about a little reform in Japan in terms of open markets, just to be fair about it?
No. All right, that's what we've been debating. We're not going to settle it tonight. Thank you, Senator Reigle. Thank you, Professor Tsurumi. Fred and I, however, will settle it in just a moment.
To get rid of her gray, my wife can spend 40 minutes. But I discovered the 5-minute hair coloring.
The revolutionary discovery called Just for Men from the leader in men's hair coloring. Simply apply Just for Men and in 5 minutes shampoo out.
Gray is blended away. The look of my natural color is back in 5 minutes. That was me, and it won't fade or wash out.
My hair takes forever, but you look great in just 5 minutes.
The look of your natural color in just 5 minutes with Just for Men.
On October 27, 1986, the biggest trade in the history of the London Stock Exchange took place. They traded in their way of doing business. What's most interesting is the computerized system they chose to replace it with. One stock market in America has already used for 2 decades. The NASDAQ stock market.
The reinvention of the Ford Escort added a new level of design and performance to small cars. And now, we've added a new, more sophisticated Ford Escort. Introducing the new 4-door Ford Escort LX sedan, a car designed to offer exceptional value and quality, and even the power of the GT, but with a style all its own. Have you wanted a style all your own? Have you driven a Ford lately?
Thursday night, Dominique Wilkins has put the league on notice. This year, the sky's the limit. Catch a star at the top of his game when the Mavericks take on the Hawks. Live at 7:35 Eastern, Thursday night on TBS.
A programming note, as Larry King likes to say. For the rest of this week, the Buchanan Memorial Chair here on Crossfire will be occupied by Lieutenant Colonel Oliver North, U.S. Marine Corps retired. Fred, don't you agree with me that it's pathetic for the leader of this New World Order to be going over there with a bunch of whining executives begging them to buy our stuff?
A little bit, but I think what's going to happen is Bush is going to wind up doing the right thing for the wrong reasons, and he's doing all this for political reasons, and acting it in a very crude way, but he's going to wind up with the Japanese making trade concessions that are good. It's the only thing that works with him. You got to pound them.
They're not going to open up their markets. They're going to say, all right, we'll give you a little bit, a few percentages here. That's managed trade.
That's better than nothing.
It's a bad idea. It's the road to ruin. From the left, I'm Mike Kinsley. Good night for Crossfire.
From the right, I'm Fred Barnes. Join Mike and Ollie next time for another edition of Crossfire.
And Prime News is next. Let's get a quick look at the headlines. Here's Bernard Shaw. Bernie?
Thank you, Mike. U.S. car makers deny they want favors from Japan as President Bush prepares for trade talks with Prime Minister Miyazawa. Hidden dangers are found on Dallas playgrounds. Children have been playing on contaminated soil. And in Yugoslavia, federal warplanes attack and kill European Community Truce observers. Those stories and more ahead on Prime News.
Coming up, Prime News, followed by Larry King Live after a word from your local cable system here on CNN.
In 1957, America was on the move, searching for success, for the American dream, for a great-tasting cheeseburger. And we found it at Country Kitchen.
Oh, baby, not the hair.
A lot has changed since then.
Come in for our winter white sale. We've got lots of good food at low white sale prices, like cake and eggs, only $1.99.
Some things, however, will never change.
Yesterday and today, Country Kitchen.
To be effective, your advertising must be seen by all the right people.
place it on cable television in Des Moines. Heritage Cablevision lets you advertise your product or service on channels your customers are watching. That targeting, together with our low spot cost, makes cable advertising in Greater Des Moines one smart buy. Reach all the right people. Call Heritage Advertising Sales today. Cable television advertising. It's affordable and it's effective.
It was a dinner unlike any dinner ever held before.
I once caddied for the National Amateur.
27 different religious groups
Where does it begin? Where does it begin, the whole concept of peace?
joining together to celebrate the success of their TV channel. That the channel lasted even a day surprised many.
Now, stop me if you've heard this one, if it responds to any Jewish story.
But with a little faith and some financial help from TCI,
I heard it.
Vision is now catching
Let me
on.
tell you the punchline. Let me tell you the punchline. Wait a second.
1,050 people on the line. 1,050 people on the line right now.
This is a deal.
At this very moment, you could be missing out on the most remarkable sales event ever, the Home Shopping Club Bargathon.
Wonderful. I think it's fantastic. I think it's the most fantastic buy.
Bargathon, where prices keep dropping and dropping.
When I saw this, I just really flipped.
You could be missing a Bargathon right now. Why wait? Tune in Home Shopping Club now and get in on the sale of a lifetime.
This is CNN.
This is CNN's Prime News, taking the time to examine world events, issues, and newsmakers. With Bernard Shaw in Washington and Susan Rook in Atlanta.
Thank you for joining us. President Bush's much talked about trade mission to Japan is set to move into high gear. He's now in Tokyo, and his talks with Japan's Prime Minister are due to start in about an hour and a half. It will be a showdown or a letdown for a president facing an election year economic slump. CNN senior White House correspondent Charles Bierbauer is with the president in Japan.
Kemari is an ancient ritualized sport once played by the Japanese imperial family. Global sportsman George Bush could not resist jumping into a new game with both feet and a soccer-style header, which does not fit the rules. There's the metaphor for Bush's problem in Japan, where the rules for the trading game are what bedevil the U.S. On this trip through Asia and the Pacific, Bush is calling for a level playing field that would give U.S. goods the same access to markets that foreign traders have in the U.S.
We need more Americans who can speak Japanese and who understand the workings of the Japanese marketplace.
That marketplace has been hard for Americans, from agribusiness to the auto business, to penetrate. Prime Minister Miyazawa is prepared to make sure Bush does not go home empty-handed.
I'm well aware of the economic difficulties that President Bush faces, and I would like to extend to him every support I can, consistent with the principles of free market and free trade.
Not all Japanese share that feeling, and the reluctance goes beyond the leftist fringe that needs little prompting to shout its Yankee go-home message. In fact, American businessmen traveling with the president suggest that they do not need piecemeal gestures so much as Japan's system needs wholesale revision. You can't usually get a president to open a Toys R Us store, but you can if you're trying to persuade Japanese consumers to open their purses for more than a security check.
We have much to learn from the 3-year battle at Toys R Us waged to pry open the $6 billion Japanese toy market.
Bridging the cultural gap and the trade deficit remains a problem. In Japan's ancient capital, Kyoto, the waters were troubled by nothing more than the koi, as Bush spent the day touring with friend and former Prime Minister Toshiki Kaifu. But Imperial Japan was a closed society, and modern Japan has only selectively opened to the rest of the world. Charles Bierbauer, CNN, Osaka, Japan.
The chairman of the big three American car makers suggested today They may be taking a page from the modern Japan. The three said their inclusion in the president's traveling entourage may symbolize the start of a closer working relationship, much like the relationship between government and industry in Japan. On their first day in Japan, all three were critical of Japanese trade practices, and all three said they want more concessions than the Japanese have indicated they are willing to make.
We know our problems. They don't have to preach to us. Are we going to argue? We're going to argue? Yes, it includes everything. Whether it's management or labor unions or health care being out of control or education and training, you name it. We got a lot of problems, or cost of capital, as I suggested. We know our set of problems, but that doesn't forgive these people for doing unfair trade. I mean, we've got to get that handled, and that's what we're here for.
Ford Chairman Robert Poling warned the Japanese they can expect the Congress to pass protectionist legislation if President Bush does not come away from Tokyo with concessions.
In Detroit, auto executives and experts are watching the Tokyo trade mission with great interest. But as CNN's Ed Garston reports, many of them are keeping their expectations in check.
U.S. car makers want to shatter the barriers into the Japanese market with new products like the Jeep Grand Cherokee and the Dodge Viper, both making their debut at the North American International Auto Show in Detroit.
In fact, we are ready to produce as many Vipers for the Japanese market as the traffic will bear.
And that's part of the reason the leaders of Detroit's big three car companies have hit the road to Tokyo to clear the path to the Japanese market.
I think we want to get in there with more of the North American and European cars. I think we do. I know we do. And we will continue to push to get that done.
Contrary to what has been written in some reports, GM has not been defeated by the Japanese.
But by all accounts, the U.S. automakers shouldn't count on their Tokyo talks to lift many roadblocks to the Japanese markets.
Not much. I think it's really symbolic.
They'll get a lowering of official barriers to selling cars there, for example. And unfortunately, it's not going to amount to a hill of beans. Even if they got a huge increase in their percentage of the car market, it would still be just a few tens of thousands of units.
In fact, U.S.-made cars account for less than 0.5% of vehicles sold in Japan, while the Japanese automakers have captured almost 30% of the U.S. market. One Japanese auto writer believes it comes down to quality and price.
That's a big factor. You compare two similar-sized cars, American, Japanese, and American is more expensive, well, you'll think twice.
The big three have also slowed the pace in retooling their cars to put the steering wheel on the right side, as they do in Japan.
General Motors is importing right-hand drive cars into Japan today. We have Opels that are right-hand drive vehicles, so that GM is supplying the Japanese market with right-hand vehicles today. The problem is, I think last year we sold something like 12 or 1,500, that's all.
But the big three will take what they can get to make inroads elsewhere in Japan. They're hopeful, but realistic.
I don't want to encourage expectations today that when the president comes home, and the three chairmen, to use the more appropriate title, we're not going to announce victory, and Japan is not going to find that everyone wants a Lincoln Town car, and they'll be happy forever after. So it's going to take time.
But coming off the worst sales year in almost a decade, the big three are desperate to find new markets. And they were just hoping the Tokyo talks might open just one more. Ed Garston, CNN, Detroit.
Still to come on Prime News, Georgia's new leaders put a violent end to a rally for the exiled president. Contaminated soil is cleared from Dallas playgrounds as frustrated parents wonder how to protect their children. And U.S. bobsledders look to computer simulators to steer them to Olympic gold.
How can you tell a raisin nut from an ordinary raisin? Raisin nuts shop in big and tall shops. They are frequently mistaken for dirigibles. And they have a heck of a time hiding behind trees. But the best way to spot a raisin nut is to taste one. Because when you take a fat, juicy raisin and roll it in a nutty coating, it keeps it plumper, makes it extra tasty. The toasted bran flakes and big crunchy almonds help too. For big